I think not. I'd thought about politics for a while and realized that I had neither the patience.
Recently, social media has been buzzing about a handwritten letter said to be from Scott Newman, the eldest son of the legendary blue-eyed actor Paul Newman. At first, people thought it was merely a sorrowful farewell from a wounded soul, but just hours later, the contents of the letter shook all of Hollywood. In those trembling lines, Scott not only spoke of his lonely childhood, but also revealed the dark secret that the Newman family had kept hidden for decades. The real reason Paul Newman left his mother, Jackie Witt, the times he pretended to love in order to keep his perfect image, and especially the ambiguous relationship between Paul Newman and a famous fellow actor. And in today's video, we'll read through every word of that letter, the final confession of Scott Newman, the only son who dared to speak the truth about the man the world once idolized, but never truly understood. No one might have imagined that behind the glittering fame of Hollywood, the life of Paul Newman began in a small apartment in Chicago in the late 1940s. At that time, Paul was just a young man studying at Yale University, living a hard life, and performing in small theaters to make ends meet. That was where he met Jackie Witt, a 19-year-old girl with golden hair, deep eyes, and a radiant smile. At first sight, they said Paul fell in love with Jackie instantly. The two married in December 1949, when Paul's career was still uncertain. Just starting out, Paul decided to pursue acting in New York, where Jackie left behind her promising modeling career to take care of the family. She believed that love and loyalty would keep them together forever. In 1950, Scott Newman was born. In the early years, their family life seemed like the perfect image of classic American love: a devoted wife, a hard-working husband, and a complete family. But beneath that perfect exterior, cracks had already begun to show, mostly because of Paul's growing hunger for fame. As Paul's career began to rise, he was home less and less. Film shoots, after parties, and invitations from the film industry gradually turned Jackie into a shadow in her husband's life. New York newspapers at the time reported that Paul Newman was the most promising new face of 1954. And major magazines like Photoplay and Modern Screen constantly praised him, making him an increasingly bright star. Meanwhile, Jackie stayed home caring for their son, hoping her love could keep the family steady. But every time Paul returned, the house felt colder, and Jackie couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Though she smiled at her husband, she later admitted she felt utterly alone in a marriage falling apart. A close friend of Jackie said she often cried when reading interviews in which Paul spoke about the freedom of a single artist. Scott, growing up, witnessed all this pain. In his final letter, he wrote, "I still remember how Mom used to sit alone by the window. She never said anything, just stared outside as if waiting for someone. I think maybe she was waiting for Dad." At that time, Paul Newman's career had skyrocketed, and he didn't even notice his family life was crumbling. In 1953, he signed a contract with Warner Brothers and officially became one of Hollywood's top stars. Rumors about a mystery woman began circulating around the movie Picnic 1955, and the public started questioning Paul's private life. Reporters from The Hollywood Reporter and Life magazine noted that Paul was frequently seen with a young, beautiful, and talented actress at after-parties. These rumors soon spread widely. Jackie heard the rumors. Though she never spoke up, her silence was the most painful answer. Neighbors in Westport recalled seeing Jackie drive alone to New York, returning late at night, with red, swollen eyes, unmistakable signs of heartbreak. Scott continued in his letter, "Dad was a hero to the whole country, but to me, he was just a guest passing through his own house. Mom never said a bad word about him, but I could feel every wound in her silence." The growing distance pushed their marriage toward collapse. Paul became increasingly consumed by work, and Jackie, though loving and selfless, was emotionally drained. By 1957, Los Angeles newspapers simultaneously reported on Paul's affair. His silence in the face of these rumors marked the end of their marriage. In 1958, the marriage officially ended. Jackie gained custody of Scott while Paul moved out and began a completely new chapter of his life. Scott's letter ended with painful words. Mom once said Dad was the only man in her world. But now I'm not sure he ever belonged to that world at all. A year later, the name Joanne Woodward began appearing everywhere as the woman who had completely changed Paul Newman's life. I never understood why Dad left Mom. Even though she gave him everything, I only saw him drift further away, as if a part of him no longer belonged to our family. When Paul Newman and Jackie Witt were still married, Paul began a romantic relationship with Joanne Woodward, a talented actress he met on the set of The Long Hot Summer in 1953. While Paul was becoming a rising star with a glittering career, Joanne was a young, ambitious actress seeking recognition in the film industry. Their connection wasn't just friendship, it grew into something much deeper. Although Paul was already married, the relationship between him and Joanne became a love they could no longer hide. They couldn't resist their feelings and began spending private time together, though the relationship couldn't be public. Those evenings together, long late-night talks after filming their bond, deepened. Surely for Jackie, Paul's absences couldn't go unnoticed. Yet she stayed silent, a silence that spoke of pain. Even though they tried to keep it secret, their relationship couldn't stay hidden in gossip-filled Hollywood. Scott wrote in his letter, "Mom always stayed silent, but I knew she sensed something. She didn't say it, but I could see the pain in her eyes every time Dad came home from a trip." From 1953 to 1958, Paul and Joanne's relationship continued to grow even as Paul remained married to Jackie. But the cracks widened. Business trips, after parties, and vacations together made people in Hollywood suspicious. The Hollywood Reporter, Variety, and tabloids began publishing pieces that, though indirect, made their affair increasingly obvious. Paul Newman never officially admitted his relationship with Joanne, but people in the industry, even close friends, began to notice undeniable signs. In the mid-1950s, Paul and Joanne spent a great deal of private time together. They traveled together, shared important moments, and appeared at events without trying to hide it. For Jackie, the truth became undeniable. She had known for a long time but chose silence, unable to face the painful truth. Scott, watching the changes in his family, couldn't understand why his father acted that way. He wrote, "Why did Dad choose someone else when Mom had done everything for him? She stood by him through his hardest years, yet he sought love elsewhere. I'll never understand that." Eventually, the truth came out. Jackie discovered that Paul and Joanne's relationship wasn't just a rumor, it was real. The heartbreak of Paul's betrayal didn't just wound Jackie, it deeply scarred Scott as well. He witnessed the collapse of his family, his mother unable to endure the distance and betrayal any longer. When Paul and Joanne officially became a public couple in 1958, Paul and Jackie's marriage ended. Jackie gained custody of Scott, and Paul left to start a new life with Joanne. After the divorce, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward married and had 3 children together, Eleanor Nell, Melissa, and Claire Newman. However, in the years that followed, Paul continued to struggle with unresolved emotional issues. Drinking and anger problems caused ongoing turmoil in his relationship with Joanne, making their home life tense. For Scott, even though his father had found a new partner, he never escaped the feeling of abandonment. His father's betrayal wasn't just a blow to Jackie, it was a lifelong wound for Scott, who always lived under the overwhelming shadow of a famous father. After marrying Joanne Woodward, it seemed Paul Newman had finally found peace in a new family, but in truth, it was a battle within himself. Though the love between Paul and Joanne was real, their early years together were not peaceful. They were filled with emotional storms. Despite his fame, Paul carried unresolved inner struggles. He had long battled an unhealthy dependence on alcohol, which began in the early 1950s when his career was rising. Drinking became his way to cope with stress from work and family. Paul's drinking led to endless nights and unexplained outbursts of anger. Everyone around him, from Joanne to his children, was affected. Joanne, though deeply in love and doing her best to help, couldn't control his temper. Each time Paul came home, he seemed like a stranger, not the man she had fallen in love with. Their frequent arguments made their relationship increasingly tense. Joanne later shared that she often felt like she was living with someone she no longer knew. She tried to protect her children from the chaos Paul brought into the house. In those moments, she had to hide her pain behind the false smiles Paul presented to the public. But this turmoil wasn't limited to Joanne. Even after remarrying, Paul couldn't silence the storms inside him. He would sometimes reach out to Jackie only to vent his frustration, scolding her as if nothing had changed. Though she was no longer his wife, she remained the person he turned to when anger consumed him. Meanwhile, Scott, Paul, and Jackie's son could not escape his father's expectations. Paul often criticized him, pushing him to meet unreachable standards. Living under his father's fame, both in the public eye and at home, left Scott without peace. His father's harshness and absence gradually led him into depression. Paul's life with Joanne, though more public, was far from peaceful. Drinking, anger, and emotional struggles turned him into a father who often failed his children, and a husband unable to sustain lasting happiness. Though Joanne loved him deeply, she couldn't bear the pain of his unpredictable moods forever. Despite everything, Paul Newman always affirmed his love for Joanne. He admitted feeling guilty for his past mistakes, but confessed he couldn't change who he was. Their bond was powerful, yet even that love couldn't erase the old wounds. Paul's life, whether with Joanne Woodward or within his family, remained haunted by inner conflict. Those who loved him couldn't escape the impact of his unresolved pain. In the end, Paul Newman could never completely escape himself, and those struggles, even with Joanne by his side, remained shadows that followed him through his life. Things did not end there. The connections in Paul's life did not stop at his wife and children. Stories about same-gender relationships would continue to jolt Hollywood and push Paul Newman's life into a state more tangled and complicated than ever. Hollywood whispered about Paul's unusual connections, but the one that sparked the most curiosity and debate among the public was with Robert Redford, his co-star kindred spirit, and according to many rumors, the only man who ever truly changed Paul. I don't understand what Dad found in him. Maybe it was something Mom could never give him: freedom, or perhaps an understanding he didn't dare seek within himself. They first met in the legendary film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969. From their earliest days working together, an indescribable bond existed between them. They understood each other through glances, lines of dialogue, and the quiet pauses on set. Crew members recalled that Paul and Robert would spend hours together after filming, not saying much, simply sharing drinks, talking, or staring into the distance. At first, people saw this as a friendship between two gifted men. But after the film wrapped, they continued to meet, appearing together at parties, taking private trips, and enjoying long holidays in Europe. Once Vanity Fair revealed that they stayed in the same villa in the south of France during a 1971 vacation, each reportedly had a separate room, but only one bed was used. According to someone on the crew, the connection between them began to cross the line of friendship. Paul, always passionate about experience, initially viewed it as an adventure in Hollywood's intricate world where everyone hid their own secrets. Then the unexpected happened. Paul Newman truly fell in love. When the rumors spread, Joanne was said to have grown furious and smashed a mirror in the bedroom. Yet Paul did not deny anything. He simply stayed silent, avoided all questions, and quietly kept his connection with Redford. Meanwhile, Robert Redford, reserved and carrying the polished image of an American gentleman, was torn between real feelings and social expectations. Dad was always searching for someone who understood him, but he chose people who never dared speak the truth. Maybe he feared the truth even more than loneliness, Scott wrote. Columnist Liz Smith, New York Post, 1982, reported that between 1970 and 1975, Paul and Robert still attended events together, but always kept just enough distance. Behind the scenes, however, it was different. They were spotted vacationing at Lake Tahoe and later in Amalfi, Italy, where a hotel staffer once said they looked more like a couple in love than friends. Insiders confirmed that Robert Redford once tried to end the relationship, fearing for both of their reputations. Paul, however, could not let go. He would often call Redford on late nights after drinking, and sometimes even show up at his house in Santa Monica, causing no small amount of trouble for Redford and his family. A mutual friend recalled that Joanne Woodward once had to personally take Paul home after he spent an entire night sitting in a car outside Redford's gate. "I saw Dad lose his sense of direction, as if he no longer knew who he was. Whenever he left home, he said he was going to work, but I knew he was running from something, maybe from himself," Scott continued. Throughout the 1970s, rumors about Paul Newman and Robert Redford became a hot topic in the press. Outlets like The Hollywood Reporter and People magazine repeatedly ran stories hinting that the relationship between the two stars went beyond friendship. Yet both men remained silent, never confirming, never denying. For Paul, this connection was both joy and torment. With Robert, he felt he could be himself, not a star, not Joanne's husband, just a lonely man finally understood. But once sober, Paul felt guilty, afraid of judgment, and afraid to shatter the flawless image he had built his whole life. As for Redford, though he cared deeply for Paul, he could not make it public. A soaring career and responsibilities to his family led him to keep quiet and slowly withdraw from Newman's life. They still appeared together on television and smiled through interviews, but there was a distance between them that no one else could grasp. When that friendship faded, Paul slipped into a long stretch of depression. He drank more, spoke less, and seemed to lose his way. To the public, he was still a screen legend, Hollywood's ideal man. But to Scott, he had become a weary father collapsing under his own emotions. Dad was no longer my hero. He was just a man trying to run from the very name Paul Newman. And then tragedy began. As Scott Newman gradually sank into depression, the result of a lifetime lived under the overwhelming shadow of his father, a man the world admired, yet whose son drifted lost in despair. I always felt I had to live under Dad's shadow. Everything was compared to him. I know I could never be like him. I just wanted to be myself. Maybe that was too much to ask. As the son of film legend Paul Newman, Scott Newman's life was defined from birth by one word: expectations. No one saw Scott as an individual. In the public eye, he was merely Paul Newman's son, a name that carried both pride and a crushing burden. Despite trying to prove himself in cinema, Scott never escaped his father's towering shadow. Paul was a legend in the hustler Cool Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid roles that made him an icon. Scott, by contrast, was routinely described by the media as the lesser version of Newman whenever he appeared. He began acting in the early 1970s, appearing in a few smaller films like The Towering Inferno and Fraternity Row, but left little lasting mark. Reviews in the Los Angeles Times and Variety noted that Scott had the looks, but lacked soul in his acting. Those words cut deep. He longed to be recognized for his own abilities, not his father's fame. Dad was an incredible example, but I never achieved anything close. People said I had potential, but no one looked at me without thinking of him, Scott wrote in an unpublished memoir. Failure followed failure, and Scott withdrew. He avoided the public, declined interviews, and lived a quiet life in a small Los Angeles apartment. Friends said he often couldn't sleep, skipped meals, and spent long hours sitting silently by the window, an image that echoed his mother Jackie Wheat years before. Therapists diagnosed Scott with severe depressive disorder combined with social anxiety, leaving him feeling constantly watched, judged, and never good enough. At times he used tranquilizers and underwent cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT, but the effect did not last. Joanne Woodward Scott's stepmother tried her best to pull him from the darkness, but her care unintentionally deepened his insecurity. Joanne was an Oscar-winning actor as talented as Paul. To Scott, she embodied everything he felt he could never reach: success and recognition. The pressure came not only from the media and audiences, but also from his relationship with his father. Though Paul Newman loved his son, he never fully grasped Scott's emotional wounds. To Paul, failure was temporary. To Scott, it was collapse. Their meetings grew colder. Paul still spoke and showed concern, but their views of life were so different that they could not understand each other. He was a good father in everyone's eyes, but to me he was a stranger, carrying a glow I could never touch, Scott recorded in a 1977 diary. Later, Scott left film sets and became a motorcycle riding coach for stunt work, a less high-profile job that made him feel more real. Yet the depression did not relent. He drank often combined sleep aids and gradually lost emotional stability. Some close friends recalled that Scott once wanted to write a memoir about the life of a man living under his father's shadow, but the manuscript was never finished. The incomplete pages found in his apartment after he passed contained only a few final lines. I tried everything to be seen for who I am, but maybe that will never happen. Maybe I was born to be a name standing behind someone else. Depression did not just strip Scott of self-belief, it severed his connection to the world. Each day he withdrew further, spoke less, and nearly vanished from Hollywood. All that remained of Scott Newman was silence, something he once described as the echo of a son lost in a great family. That very silence became an omen for the final tragedy when Scott Newman, on a dark night, lost himself forever. By the late 1970s, Scott Newman was no longer the energetic young man who dreamed of becoming a great actor like his father. After years battling severe depression, anxiety, and a series of career setbacks, he fell into a profound emotional collapse. Close friends said Scott often stayed up many nights in a row, sitting alone in his Los Angeles apartment, a glass in hand, staring into nothing. He no longer found joy in acting nor in the motorcycle coaching work, the one thing that had once made him feel free. His life had dwindled to a chain of solitary days, medication, alcohol, and a frightening quiet. I tried to become someone Dad could be proud of, But the more I tried, the more I lost myself, Scott wrote in his final journal pages. After stepping away from Hollywood, Scott lived quietly, nearly cutting off contact with the press. Occasionally, he attended parties or charity events, but the smile on his face was a fragile mask hiding exhaustion within. Friends described him as a soul trapped between light and shadow. In 1978, Scott was invited to take a supporting role in a small action film in California, seemingly a chance to revive his career. During filming, however, he suffered a minor knee injury. Pain combined with his habit of self-medicating with tranquilizers set the stage for disaster. According to Los Angeles County Police records, on the evening of November 20, 1978, Scott drank strong liquor with a few friends at a bar in Westwood. Back at his hotel, he took Valium and codeine for the pain, an extremely risky combination. The next morning, hotel staff found him unconscious in his room. Although he was rushed to the hospital immediately, he did not survive. The coroner's report confirmed that a dangerous mix of medication and alcohol was the direct cause. Scott Newman passed at 28, a heartbreaking end for the son of a legend. News of his death stunned Hollywood. Papers from the Los Angeles Times to People magazine ran headlines like "Son of Paul Newman dies in tragic accident." Behind those cold headlines, however, was an unspeakable grief within the Newman family. When Paul Newman heard the news, he was devastated. He blamed himself for being too consumed by his career and not spending more time with Scott. In a 1982 Time interview, Paul admitted, "I lost the boy. Not because of Hollywood, but because I didn't know how to be his father." After Scott's death, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward founded the Scott Newman Center in 1980, a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness about the misuse of substances and prescription medication among young people. It was Paul's way of making amends, turning tragedy into action to help others avoid the path his son had taken. Yet even as the years passed, the pain never fully eased. Family members said Paul often carried a photo of Scott in his wallet and sometimes sat alone staring at it for a long time. "Dad is loved by the whole world, but I just needed him to love me." Scott once wrote, "Scott Newman's passing was not only a personal tragedy, but also a warning about the cost of fame." Behind the spotlight, behind admiration from millions, was a family fractured by expectations, pressure, and an unhealed loneliness. Scott left carrying wounds his father never fully understood, leaving an emptiness in Paul Newman's heart that would never be filled. Paul Newman's life may be one of Hollywood's brightest chapters, but behind the glow lies a chain of secrets, losses, and pains that could never be fully told. Scott Newman's letter, whether real or not, forces us to ask, to become a legend, must a person sometimes trade away family love, and even themselves? What do you think about what Scott wrote in this letter? Are these merely the desperate words of a lonely son, or truths that Hollywood tried to keep hidden for decades? Leave a comment below so we can discuss. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos, where we'll continue to reveal untold stories from the world of Hollywood stars.